Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. Joining us as always, the Prince of Twitter, the Regent of RedState.com, Andrew Malcolm of RedState.com. Andrew. How are you this week, sir?
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. Thank you very much.
Well, you got a couple of great columns up, and definitely going to get to the one with Swalwell. Just as we're speaking on Monday, we're still not sure whether there's going to be talks in Islamabad. I was kind of amused by this morning, is that Donald Trump, who I think has been playing this pretty well, he told the New York Post this morning in an interview that nobody's playing games. I beg to differ.
Oh, boy.
There are games afoot across the board on this thing. And that's part of the problem is that we don't know who's actually playing the games in Tehran, right? Because we had a ceasefire deal with Abbas Araghchi, and that was supposed to be predicated on fully opening the Strait of Hormuz, no tolls, no nothing, and the IRGC reneged on that. So we slapped them with a full-on blockade, and we exercised that option yesterday. We disabled one of their tankers, took it over. We're presently inspecting what it was carrying because we suspect it wasn't just oil. And then they said, well, we're not going to show up to Islamabad for the talks. But now I'm hearing that they are, because the games continue to be played, Andrew. They're looking for a concession from us to get them to the table again. And I don't think Donald Trump's in the mood for concessions at the moment.
I hope not, because then he would be the one getting played by their game.
I agree.
They have stretched these things out with every president they've dealt with, and it worked beautifully with Obama, who ended up paying them billions of dollars as a reward for the nuclear agreement, and gave them the reward before.
Yeah, up front,
before they fulfilled. I mean, it's such a joke. And they have learned that Americans are, unlike an authoritarian regime like theirs, leaders are susceptible to political pressures. And so they try to create them by stretching it out, making the war longer, making the talks longer. And actually Putin is doing the same thing. So I think Trump wants to deal with Putin more than this one, but Trump has to look like he's not eager for war. So, what is it, Wednesday, I think the ceasefire ends, or this week anyway?
Ceasefire. It's on Wednesday. You're correct about that.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that if they don't show, or if it's another one of these, well, we have to think about it, then the ceasefire's over and they should get nailed.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is this to me is what the point is. They're trying to stretch this out because A, they want to get concessions. B, they want us to just extend the ceasefire and to lift the blockade while they're delaying. But I also think that part of this is a delay that is intended for the War Powers Act deadline that's coming up in a couple of weeks.
That's right, Ed. Yeah.
Right.
Good point.
Trump has got to go back to Congress at the 60-day mark, and technically he has to seek authorization. So he's got to get them to pass an authorization. But basically, first off, no president actually believes in this. Secondly, he can probably get by for another 30 days under the withdrawal window. You really have 90 days, not 60 days. He can pretend to be withdrawing for the next 30 days. So he's got time to continue to do things. But also, I think he's going to argue at some point that the ceasefire and the end of other kinetic operations, with the exception of the seizure of the vessel, was the end of the military operation, the first military operation. And if he's got to go back, well, that's a whole other thing, and we're going to reset the clock.
Yeah, right. Oh,
I don't know if Congress is going to go for that, but they may have trouble. They may have trouble fighting it. And, you know, I don't think that Congress is going to, well, yeah, it's hard to say what Congress is going to do, but I don't think that they're going to disauthorize this as long as the regime is firing at ships in the Strait of Hormuz either. So if that's still going on, I think Congress is stuck with this, just like Trump is stuck with it. He can't let Iran off with control of the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, that's just simply a non-starter. So, I mean, I guess that's a strategy for Iran to try to run out the clock on the War Powers Act and force Trump to withdraw. But I think that they're fooling themselves if they think that that's going to bother Trump at all. I mean, what are they going to do? Impeach him? They've done that twice already. They're going to do it as soon as they get an opportunity to do it again.
Yeah, right. You're right. You're right. It's hard to tell, probably impossible to tell what Iran is thinking or whoever's in charge there.
Well, we don't even know that much, right? I mean, we really don't know who's in charge over there.
They're what's the word? Not logical thinkers.
Irrational.
Yeah, irrational. There we go. Yeah, and they go by alleged religious tenets, which seem very flexible to suit whatever they want to do. So, but the Pope says we have to work for peace with them.
Yeah, that would take up a whole podcast. I'm going to tell you this right now. I'm very frustrated with a Pope who is lecturing us about the use of force while he says nothing about the regime killing 32,000 of his own people in the streets. You know, there's this
Nigeria too. Yeah.
Well, they talk about Nigeria. They do talk about Nigeria. It just doesn't get a lot of coverage in the press here because the press isn't really interested in pursuing that story. The Vatican actually does push back. What they don't do is ask for help or ask people to intervene because they know intervention means military action. And right now, this pontificate, and especially the past pontificate, is very much bought into the idea that pacifism is Christianity. You know, St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas knew better. It's the reason why Augustine came up with the just war doctrine, and Thomas Aquinas refined it very specifically. These were two doctors of the church, recognized, you know, thinkers of the church. That's what that means, not that they were physicians. Luke was a physician, though, so there you go. He's a doctor of the church and a doctor in the church. So, but these guys aren't smarter than Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas understood that, yes, you don't want war. War is bad. War is very bad. But there are times when justice requires military action. And so he set up a very strict, you know, a strict set of restrictions on that so that you could identify whether something was a just war. And I think it'd be an interesting debate to have as to whether or not that applies to this particular war. But the problem is that Pope Leo XIV and some of the bishops here don't even want to have that debate. They don't want to discuss it because they want to argue that there's no such thing as a just war, and that war is equally morally repugnant regardless of who's the aggressor, who's not, and what you're trying to do to deal with a issue that deals with nation state protection. It's a different thing. Aquinas knew it. Augustine knew it. Last couple of popes, not so much, but you know.
Not so much. I love that phrase. Not so much. It says so much in just 3 words.
Well, I just think that they're trapped in the thinking of their time, which is that you've got this hippy dippy idea of Christianity being nothing but pacifism. Jesus went in and overturned the tables in the temple. He was using a corded whip to get them out of the temple. it's not as though Jesus, and Jesus also said at one point, do you think I come to bring peace between people? No, I come to bring a sword, right? His words were going to force people to choose. That's what he meant by that. Not that people were literally going to go out with the sword, although they did. So yeah, the argument against this could have been applied in 2011 to Muammar Gaddafi. And yet the same people who are arguing for this point today had nothing to say in 2011 when Barack Obama spent months bombing Gaddafi out of power.
We came, we saw, he died.
We came, we saw, he died. Yeah. And oddly enough, I think Hillary Clinton, if you got her in an honest moment, would probably say, yeah, we should probably be doing this. She might be the only Democrat, maybe other than John Fetterman, who would at this point in time.
Yeah, well, I defer to you on all things religious.
Oh, don't do that. That's a huge mistake.
No, it's not. But from the point of view, from the longer term point of view, which I'm not sure, well, I am sure. I don't think the president has made enough of the existential threat.
I agree.
That Iran with a nuclear weapon would be. There's no doubt in any rational person's mind that they would use it. And so to prevent that, unfortunately, you have to have some military action. I just want to make sure that it's decisive military action,
right?
And that Putin and Iran, they know that there are political pressures against keeping this military action going, and so they're playing it out, hoping that the patience of the West expires and that Trump's Trump's desire for a deal supersedes his desire to make something permanent about them and nuclear weapons. I hope he does, because I think this is the chance to do it, and I hope he does.
Well, I hope he does too, and I think that you're right that we're not making the case strongly enough about the existential nature of the threat of a nuclear armed Iran. I mean, I agree with you on that. I don't think that they have been good enough on that score. But they have at least tried to address it. And part of the issue there is that they're going through reporters rather than having Trump go directly to voters, get up in front of a microphone. I mean, kind of did that a little bit the other day. I forget where he was at. He was at a conference someplace, and he got up in front of a microphone and made the argument for it. While he's still talking about wanting a deal, that we've already had regime change. These people are less worse than the people that came before him, which I'm not exactly sure is accurate, by the way. I think we got the radicals. We've been left with the radicals, and we need another round of tree pruning to get those.
That's like you and your narrative maintenance phrase. You're coming up with some good ones.
Well, I have a lot of time on my hands these days, I guess. I don't know, but
yeah.
But I think that this is a problem of trying to work filters rather than work around the filters. And I would like to see him do more of that,
Absolutely. And Trump is good at that. Trump is good at making the case. If he can discipline his argument to the real point, which is we can't allow them to have a nuclear weapon.
Yep.
And so anything we have to do to ensure that they don't ever is what we're going to do, and not get sidetracked by talk about deals and ceasefires and blockades and all this other stuff. Is go in and finish it. These wars or any war, really. Remember, they were going to topple Gaddafi in just a couple of weeks, and that took 9 months.
Yep.
And that was a double cross. They said if he gave up his nuclear weapons program, which he did, then they wouldn't bother him. So then they doubled back, and that's something that Iran is watching too. You don't do a deal. So you don't do a deal. You have to impose a deal on Iran. You're not going to. They don't do deals. These wars end up being much more than anticipated. It's happening in Iran, and it's a big place. It's just a little bit smaller than Alaska. It's happened in Ukraine to Putin. Remember, it was going to take just a few days. Now we're past 4 years. So
Yep.
These things have a way of stretching on and getting more complicated and more complex, and we've seen that with Iran. We were going to go in and bomb them, and then it would be over. Well, no. There's a lot of places to bomb. There's a lot of wiggling that they can do, and so, excuse me, this thing gets stretched out, and Americans have a short attention span and a short patience, and especially if it involves Trump, they're not very understanding. So
Nope.
he needs to make the case, but you're right, no filters. He needs to make the case and to make it repeatedly, the same way, he fixed the border. Remember the 2024, the border
Right.
was the single biggest issue, and he fixed it like that. And then that goes away in the mind of Americans. Well, wait a minute, that's a heck of an accomplishment. So we need to drive that home and not count on their memory, which there isn't a memory as far as voters are concerned. What have you done for me today?
Well, that's always the way it is, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you used to talk about Mike Royko's joke about Chicago's motto, right? Ubi es mea.
Well,
Where's
where's mine?
mine? I
love
still
that.
remember that you used to joke around about that a lot, and
Yeah, I
it
do.
stuck with me.
Mike Royko was wonderful. Was a columnist for the Daily News, and the real motto in Chicago is "Herbs in Horto, City in a Garden," which is funny for a city whose name Chicago is an Indian word for the smelly onion that used to grow there on Michigan Avenue. But so his, I guess you could call it cynical, but also very sharp. Ubi es mea is a good one, and then you could apply that to the swamp too.
Well, yeah, you can always apply that to the swamp in DC. That was the thing, is that the swamp in DC has a lot in common with Chicago politics. I mean, it's sort of the same things. And here's my big segue. Speaking of which, we get to your column about no one knew of Swalwell's misbehaviors. We touched on this a little bit in the last podcast, but it's definitely worth covering again, because now Ruben Gallego is on the hot seat, and he is sweating big time because apparently there's some allegations about him, not to the same pitch, I guess, as Swalwell, but and everybody's trying to pretend that nobody knew nothing. Nobody knew nothing. I mean, how do you buy that? Because I don't buy it.
No, I don't buy it. Nancy Pelosi had stuff on everybody. So for her, and that's how she kept everybody in line. That's how she was so good on fundraising, so good on discipline, party discipline in the House when she was Speaker. So for her to go, no, there was just no sign of it. She promoted the heck out of Swalwell. Time and time again, she even put him in charge of the second impeachment of Trump during his first term. So it's just, how stupid do you think we are? Well, they must think we're very we're very stupid, and we're not. We're not stupid. Unfortunately, polls and history show that Congress has a very low approval rating. However, if you pursue that, they think that their local representative is just fine. Well, you add that up
Oh, yeah.
435 times, and they're all just fine. And the reelection rate, I think, is something in 80% or more. So this year, we have some hope. There's a house cleaning, a lot of retirements, especially on the Democrat side. So we're going to get a whole bunch of new blood. Now, hopefully, they're not crazy leftist extremists in the Democrat seats. Of the 40, I don't hold me to the numbers, but of the 435 seats, something like 410, 415 are pretty reasonably set in terms of partisan setting. So we're only arguing about a few races, but there will be a house cleaning. A lot of the older people, including Pelosi, who's 85. She's out of there.
Yeah, she's finally retiring, and is it Scott Wiener is the guy who's coming in? I think is the guy that's going to wind up taking their seat. Sort of, I think, was mentored into that position. I think they've been positioning him for a bit to take that over. But yeah, I mean, this to me is the media knew about this stuff. They just didn't want to report it. Yeah,
and
they knew about it for years.
They knew about Biden too.
Yeah,
Come on.
yeah, exactly.
And then, this is what I said in the column. They knew about Biden and did not report it because that would disturb their narrative maintenance, Ed.
Narrative maintenance.
That's trademarked by Mr. Morrissey. And so, but then when it all came out, finally, because, I mean, this is such a Greek play, Biden thought he was going to put Trump away. So he challenged him to an early debate in June of 24. And then, whoops, he got hoisted on his own sword.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just so rich. So once that happened, then the media made a lot of Jake Tapper and others made a good chunk of change there on books revealing how it happened.
Yeah.
It happened because
you're going to see that with Swalwell too. Now it can be told.
Well, now it can be told. Yeah.
Yeah, now it can be told, John. I wanted to mention
that's why they call it the swamp. It is a swamp.
It's a swamp
geographically, but morally, it is, and there are hardly any consequences. What was the consequences of Benghazi? Nothing. 4 people died. Nothing.
Nobody got fired. Not a single person got fired.
No. They moved a couple of deaths around with Admiral Mullen, who was supposed to be accountability review man. He never even talked to Hillary Clinton, who was in charge the whole night because Obama was AWOL that night. And then we have months of Trey Gowdy's oversight hearings, and what happened? Nothing. Just endless photo ops. So, yeah, no consequences, and they know it. So if they can get them out of there, make them resign, like they did Gonzalez and Swalwell, then, I mean, I guess that's progress.
I guess so. I got to talk a little bit about Kash Patel's defamation suit against The Atlantic. Now, here's the interesting thing, because I read this, right? And I have it in a VIP column that's going to go up a little later today. So it'll already be up by the time anybody sees this. I read through that, and two things popped out at me. First off, The Atlantic apparently ran allegations that had already been retracted by MSNBC after they had, and Patel is suing MSNBC for making him in the first place, but MSNBC ended up retracting those as part of, I guess, a way to try to defend itself against the defamation suit. That's still under litigation. The Atlantic basically rehashed it and republished it. So they knew that MSNBC had retracted it, or MS Now, whatever you want to call it. I call it M Snow, but it's the same channel. Which basically looks like actual malice, right? They had good reason to know that this was not, that these allegations were false, and ran it anyway, because another media outlet had already retracted these things because they couldn't substantiate them. There's more in the lawsuit, but the other part of this, Andrew, is the person who actually wrote the article for the Atlantic. It's a reporter named Sarah Fitzpatrick. Now, I'm not sure if you remember this.
That name sounds familiar.
Yes, it does. And that's because Sarah Fitzpatrick was one of 3 reporters, was the lead reporter on an NBC News report in September 2018 about Brett Kavanaugh running a gang rape gang. Also naming Mark Judge as one of the members of this gang that was doing gang rapes at parties. And based on the testimony of a woman named Julie Swetnick, who basically imploded, she had, as soon as anybody started asking her about, well, what do you have that substantiates this? She couldn't even substantiate her own allegations. Well, I don't know that I saw them spiking the punch, but they were by the bowl. I don't know what was going on in the room, but later I was gang raped. And but I don't know if Kavanaugh and Judge were involved, but they were there, and she wasn't even there. She was. People started digging into. She's not well. She was not a well woman, and she was represented by Michael Avenatti, who, by the way, just got out of prison. Not one of the most reliable guys in the world, but it was Sarah Fitzpatrick that ran that story without checking it.
Jeez.
And Mark Judge is the one who alerted me to it. He says, "Guess who wrote that?"
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of red flags that were on this story, and the Atlantic published it anyway. Why they're still doing business with Sarah Fitzpatrick is beyond me. It's difficult for public officials to sue for defamation.
Oh, yeah.
But in this case, I think they got a real problem.
Well, they got to prove malice. You're right.
Right. Well, this goes, and actual malice doesn't mean we hate the guy. It's a legal term, just for, Andrew knows this, but I mean, just so that people who are watching this, it means you had a reckless disregard for the truth of a situation when you had good reason to suspect that what you were publishing may not be true. That's what actual malice relates to. That's not exactly how it's phrased in Sullivan v. New York Times, but that's a pretty fair layman's approximation of it. It's not just defamatory. You have to prove that they had a reckless disregard or an intent to defame. And when you're republishing something that's already been retracted once by somebody else.
Yeah, they got some grounds there.
$250 million. I suspect that I smell a settlement in the air. Do you smell a settlement in the air, Andrew?
No, but I trust your judgment.
I smell a settlement in the air, because they're going to have to do one of two things, right? They can try to argue, I guess, that there's no actual malice involved, but sequence of events makes it pretty clear that if this is actually defamatory, they screwed up, and they did so willingly. So the only thing you have left to do is to go to the absolute defense against defamation, which is to prove it's true, which means you got to put your sources forward and ask them to explain how it's true. And I suspect that once you see who Sarah Fitzpatrick's sources are, the whole story is going to pretty much explain. It's a bunch of people who got fired probably from the FBI when they cleaned house. And yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, it is a swamp.
It is a swamp. It is a swamp, but maybe it's worth $250 million. Who knows? Could be worth $250 million. I would imagine that the settlement is going to be somewhere in the 7-figure range, along with an apology. But yeah, it's something else. All right. Well, we are just about at the end of our time here. Do you have any jokes of the day? I've got a couple for
I
you.
do. You go. I think I got a couple.
All right. So this man is sitting at the table one morning and he's reading through the newspaper and he reads this article about this beautiful actress who's about to marry a football player who is known for his lack of intellect and comportment. And the guy turns to his wife and says, you know, I'll never understand why the biggest jerks marry the most attractive wives. And his wife turns to him and says, why, thank you, dear.
Oh boy. Well, I've got one. Or I actually got a couple, I guess. These are old. Jimmy Fallon says, Obama says Americans need a leader who awakens every day and fights for their jobs. Then he said, until we find that guy, I'm still your best choice.
Yeah, you can kind of make that for about anybody, but yeah, that's a pretty good joke. I like that joke.
Yeah. And Jimmy Fallon, he said, President Obama will throw out the first pitch at the All-Star game this summer, and Joe Biden will be on hand to commit the first error. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I got one more for you.
Okay.
And it's clean. Yeah, it is. Actually is clean. All right. So this famous professor of surgery dies and goes to heaven. At the pearly gates, he's greeted and is asked, have you ever committed a sin you truly regret? And the professor says, yeah, you know, when I was a young candidate at the Hospital of St. Lucas, we played a soccer against a team from the community hospital, and I scored a goal, but we were offside and I knew it. The referee didn't see it, and that goal won us the game, but I knew that basically we had cheated, and I have regretted that my entire life. And the gatekeeper says, well, that's really actually a very minor sin, but it's good that you regret it. You are welcome to enter. And the professor says, well, thank you so much, St. Peter. And he says, well, you're welcome, but I'm not St. Peter. He's having his lunch break. I'm St. Lucas.
He's on lunch break.
I'm St. Lucas from the Hospital of St. Lucas. Thank you so much. All right. Andrew Malcolm, the Prince of Twitter, the Regent of RedState.com. We'll be back here next week for more hijinks.
No, I'll be away next week.
Well, we'll be back in 2 weeks.
There we go.
For more hijinks. We'll be back in 2 weeks for more hijinks. You guys, we got to whet the appetite. We got to make people want it. So right, there you go. Right. All right. Yeah. Andrew, always such a pleasure. We will talk to you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, everybody. See you then.